During the news, journalists from STB and ICTV begin working for you. My name is Yulia Senek. Good evening. The Russians have somewhat eased their missile and drone terror. Last night, the enemy struck with 60 Shahed and Geran attack drones. They also launched 3 ballistic missiles. Most of the UAVs were destroyed or suppressed by air defense forces or electronic warfare systems. However, unfortunately, there were hits at 12 locations. 4 people were injured as a result of Russian shelling in the Kharkiv region. In the morning, the occupiers attacked the village of Orilka in the Lozova district, damaging residential buildings. A woman was injured and her husband and 2 children experienced acute stress reactions. According to the regional prosecutor's office, the enemy reportedly used a Geran 2 drone. And during the day, an enemy drone crashed in the Kyiv district of the city. According to the city mayor, Ihor Terekov, there was no destruction or casualties. The Russian army shelled Donetsk region 27 times. 6 people were injured, according to the Donetsk military administration. The situation is hardest for our defenders in the area of Kostiantynivka. The Russians are leveling the city to the ground with aviation and artillery. Over the past day, 2 civilians were injured there and 1 person was killed. 1 casualty was recorded in Staroraiske and another in Oleksievo-Drushkivka. Drushkivka and Kramatorsk are also under enemy fire. Sloviansk and Lyman as well. 7 Russian drones struck Drushkivka, injuring a man and a woman. In Kramatorsk, 14 houses and a power line were damaged. In Sloviansk, the enemy hit a house and a garage. In Lyman, the city council building was completely destroyed by shelling. Fortunately, there were no casualties. Since the beginning of the day, there have been 133 combat engagements along the entire front line. The most intense situation remains in the Pokrovsk sector. There, our soldiers repelled about 50 assaults near 15 settlements. The Russian pressure is also being felt near Kostiantynivka. This is another strategic city for the Russians. Fighting is still ongoing there, but 12 attacks have already been repelled. 8 times the enemy attacked our positions near the Serebryansky forestry. The situation has also escalated in the area where the borders meet, Donetsk, Dnipropetrovsk and Zaporizhzhia regions. 17 clashes have already taken place in this sector, but the assaults continue. The defense of Kupiansk in the Kharkiv region also continues. There, 2 enemy attacks have been recorded so far. There were also 6 attacks in the Orikhiv sector. Russian military units that tried to approach our positions near the Antonivsky Bridge in the Kherson region were also stopped. Volodymyr Zelensky held a meeting of the Supreme Commander-in-Chief's staff. The key issue was energy, in particular, the restoration of communities after Russian strikes and the expansion of reserves of energy equipment. Communication continues with European partners who are able to support Ukraine with the necessary equipment. Among the important topics was the situation in the gas sector. They discussed gas storage for the heating season and repair work on the networks. The sources of funding for the purchase of the necessary amount of gas have been identified, the president emphasized. And of course, Zelensky discussed the issue of protecting energy facilities from airstrikes. The military is providing additional helicopters for these needs. At the same time, preparations are underway for documents for an agreement with the American side regarding the purchase of air defense systems. Weapons that change the rules on the battlefield and beyond. The missiles are capable of striking targets deep behind enemy lines and destroying Russian columns on the front line. The enemy fears them, but also actively hunts for them. This refers to the Haymars and M270 multiple launch rocket systems. Everyone constantly hears about them, celebrates their strikes, but almost no one sees how they actually work. And these systems have repeatedly launched long-range ATACMS at the enemy. The enemy doesn't hesitate to use even Iskanders against such equipment. But our war correspondent, Ole Konienko, managed to join a combat duty shift with these American MLRS and see and feel the power of these now legendary systems firsthand. More in his exclusive report.
It quickly reaches its firing position and is ready to deliver a deadly strike in just a matter of seconds.
Everyone has heard about their work, and we've seen videos of their spectacular hits more than once. It was this very equipment that during the counter-offensive helped us destroy Russians both in the Kharkiv and Kherson regions. These are Haymars, the already legendary Haymars. Now they are operating here in Donetsk region, striking at enemy rear positions.
These are unique shots. In 3 years of full-scale invasion, almost no one has ever filmed the work of a Haymars. And no one has ever stood this close to such American multiple launch rocket systems. Meanwhile, the enemy is really feeling the heat from the Haymars work. The chances of surviving its strike are almost zero. And today, the American multiple launch rocket system will target an enemy column. The Russians were advancing toward the Dobropilia direction with heavy equipment. The crew is already ready to strike. But suddenly the order is called off. The Haymars quickly leaves the field. Standing here like this is extremely dangerous. The enemy wouldn't even hesitate to use an Iskander on such a target. After a short pause, the crew receives new coordinates and returns to the firing position.
So basically they fired the Haymars. It's already out of sight, that's a smokescreen, and the rocket is on its way to the occupiers' heads.
The enemy column starts to burn, while the Haymars crew rushes off to reload. Most people jokingly call the Haymars the ghost of the front line. It fires quickly and disappears just as fast. This crew hasn't slept since 4 in the morning. Reload, strike, and then it all repeats again.
I like it when they say we hit the target. It's just beautiful. Did you hit the target today? We did. There wasn't just infantry there, but also equipment. For example, the column is moving.
17 armored vehicles, a tank and infantry on motorcycles. The Russians are stubbornly advancing in the Dobropilia direction. At the same time, they'll be stopped by Haymars, drone operators, and another American multiple launch rocket system. It's almost like a Haymars, but on tracks and a bit older. This MLRS was developed back in the 1980s, but despite its age, it's maneuverable. And its loudness would make any other rocket system jealous. So the targets for the MLRS are special.
There were cannons, there were command posts, there were UAV control points, there was infantry, there were dugouts, there were structures.
The enemy is also hunting for the M270, just like for the Haymars. The MLRS can fire not only 227mm rockets, but also send much more powerful ones at the enemy. For example, ATACMS. They strike at several hundred kilometers.
We had them, we used them, and we used them quite often. I can't tell you about the targets. That's a question for the command. They are much more effective because you can hit targets on enemy territory. The range is much greater. Plus, they're harder to shoot down or jam.
These crews are rarely seen by anyone, but they always operate in the hottest directions. Missiles launched from Haymars and M270 deliver some of the most painful blows to the enemy. And as long as our partners keep supplying us with missiles without interruption, these MLRs are never idle.
Everything is done very quickly. With the Smerch, it used to take 20 to 25 minutes. Here, it's just 5 minutes and the job is done. The missile is already flying toward the enemy.
The soldiers themselves say that the appearance of such multiple launch rocket systems has had a significant impact on the course of combat operations. The enemy can't feel safe either near the front line or deep in the rear. A strike can hit anywhere. The main thing is the range of the missiles.
The longest ones can reach up to 500 kilometers, but we aren't given those. But you would like to have them. Of course, then we could reach Moscow. And what would you like?
Oleg Kornienko, FAK ICTV, United News.
Moscow has once again demonstratively ignored Donald Trump's proposal to stop the war in Ukraine along the current line of contact. The Kremlin has categorically stated that it will not cease hostilities. The spokesperson for the Russian dictator Peskov emphasized that Moscow's position on the war remains unchanged. Meanwhile, Reuters reports that U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio may meet with Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov as early as this Thursday. The location of the meeting has not yet been determined. Let me remind you, after meeting with Volodymyr Zelensky last week, Trump called on Ukraine and Russia to stop where each side is currently positioned, that is, along the front line. Also, according to the Financial Times, during the meeting at the White House, the American leader allegedly suggested that Ukraine accept Russia's terms for ending the war. in particular to cede all of Donetsk region. Moreover, he repeated arguments he had heard from Putin during their personal conversation. However, Trump himself denied this information. Aboard the presidential plane, he stated that he did not urge Zelensky to give up Donbass, but only insisted on a ceasefire along the front line.
We never discussed this. We believe that they should simply stop at the lines where the fighting is currently taking place. There is a front line. Everything else is very difficult to agree upon. If you start talking about, you take this, we take that, there are so many different options, which is why I say, just stop right now at the front lines, go home, and stop killing people. As for Donbass, let everything remain as it is, and then perhaps something can be agreed upon later.
No one should pressure Ukraine regarding its territories, the Prime Minister of Poland emphasizes. Donald Tusk stated that instead of demanding compromises from Kyiv, the world should put pressure on Moscow to stop its aggression. And no concessions can lead to a just or lasting peace. Meanwhile, U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance stated that the Donald Trump administration will continue on the path to peace in Ukraine no matter how long it takes. According to him, the White House remains optimistic, but there is still no specific timeline for achieving peace. Vance also reported that Donald Trump has heard Ukraine's request regarding Tomahawk missiles, but a final decision on their provision has not yet been made. He explained that the main reason for caution is the priority of American security, since the country must have enough of its own weapon systems to protect its own troops. The vice president also noted that all of Trump's decisions regarding Ukraine and Russia are made in the interests of the United States. If the president decides that supplying additional weapons is in America's interest, he will support it. However, at present, there is still no such decision regarding the Tomahawks. Ukraine remains the main defender of Europe against Russian aggression. Therefore, Berlin promises to strengthen its support for Kyiv in order to force Moscow to sit down at the negotiating table, said German Chancellor Friedrich Merz. He admitted that the Ukrainian leader's visit to Washington did not go as President Volodymyr Zelensky had hoped. And this once again proves how crucial European support will be for Ukraine. Therefore, the European Union needs to make a great effort. After all, it is clear that the war can only be ended thanks to Ukraine's military strength. He admitted that the war could be ended in 24 hours. If Ukrainians stop fighting, but then there is a threat to other countries. Merz added that Ukraine's capitulation is unacceptable because in that case, Russia could move on to aggression against Europe.
Russia has not come to terms with how the world has changed. Even Putin said that the greatest catastrophe for Russia was the collapse of the Soviet Union in the 1990s. This is Putin's opinion. From this he concludes that power and the military should determine policy. He acts aggressively not only against Ukraine but also against many European countries, so we will have to defend ourselves again.